Pakistan.
responsible move.
But Hamid
Yeah,
Sahab, I'll get back to you on this. Let me put this question to you, ma'am. Talking about two very important areas. There was a time when the institutions of India, they used to be looked up to. And I still remember we always used to give examples of the Indian Election Commission during the elections that, look at the way they work, and we should do the same. We used to talk about the Indian judiciary, top judiciary I'm talking about. We used to always look up to the Indian media, not the news, but general, like movies and otherwise. Now what has happened over a period of time is that the Indian media, whether in the form of the news and current affairs, or even their film industry, very Pakistan-centric, and they want to show and promote India as if India is one of the countries in the world that has ruled and that has taken over. Second is about the Indian judiciary, ma'am. Under such influence by the current government, look at the decisions regarding the mosque, Babri Mosque I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then on top, their own former leaders are practically saying that our institutions, they've been corrupted by design. So whenever the institution of any country, I mean, they are being, taken for granted, what is left? Your take, ma'am.
Well, again, that's another very interesting question. And if you sort of reflect on what India used to say about Pakistan, only a few years ago was that Pakistan is very India-centric, that Pakistani institutions are weak, and that Pakistani democracy is not stable. It has just boomeranged on them in a very big way. And it just took the election of one fascist gentleman as Prime Minister, and that is Mr. Modi. So you're very right when you say that India actually is collapsing on itself. So as I said, that Mr. Modi actually has no legacy that he can leave behind except as the architect of the destruction and disintegration of India. So when you have this kind of a fascist mindset, this kind of overconfidence, and this kind of mind that wants to have conflict with everybody around, and when you have this desire this hegemonic desire to subjugate everybody around you, then that actually, if you look at history, is the beginning of your own disintegration. So this kind of mindset has never led any country to any kind of success. Look what is happening in the US, for example. It's a very good example. It's a great country that is being destroyed by its own people. And the same thing is happening in India, because when the leadership weakens, when the leadership itself wants to divide its society, then all the state institutions also weaken. It's a natural thing. And we have seen that division and that deterioration in all aspects of Indian society, whether it's politics, whether it's judiciary, whether it's media. Indian media used to be very, very objective and very critical also of the governments and of the policies. But you look at Indian media of today, all it can think about is still hatred against the Chinese and more so against the Pakistanis. So when this kind of leadership comes in any country, it just does not destroy the politics of the economy. It destroys and seeps through every aspect of society, of culture, of institutions. So what would you expect? This is the result of their own making. While the other countries, you look at China. China today, and I agree with my colleagues, there is absolutely no chance of a Sino-Indian war, not because the Indians don't want it. It is because the Chinese don't want it. Because the Chinese are very sure defeating India is a matter of, if not 12, 24 hours. But does China want to deviate from its path of social development and taking the country out of poverty? No. Similarly, a Sino-US war at this time is absolutely an impossibility because both these countries know their red lines. So I think what the West, I could be wrong, but I think what the West is trying to do is, and where this is where the Indians misread them, is not to destroy China or not to go at war with China. What they want to do is actually slow down the pace of their technological and economic growth. Because right now, if you talk of, let's see, even 5G technology, then it's a fact that the US is at least 3 to 4 years behind China. So their prayer is to slow down China, and so that they can catch
Primarily,
up,
yes.
and not
Yeah.
really to destroy China or to go at war with China. It is just to restrain them in their stride towards becoming the superpower.
The number one country in the world.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, ma'am.
absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your participation. Hamid Saab, it was a pleasure having you, and thank you so much, Jajwa Saab, for your participation as well. Well, what we have understood is that currently it seems, as the Chinese Defense Minister mentioned during the meeting with his counterpart Rajnath Singh in Moscow, and he said whatever is happening at the moment, India is responsible for that. India has certain designs in their mind, and remember, if the Western world, whether it's Europe or it's the American people, or maybe the establishment of USA or the current government out there, I think they're expecting a little too much from India. India is not ready yet. India is not there yet. The point is that having a huge size and having a population of 1.4 billion doesn't mean that you're a very strong country. Look at their economy. Look at the current domestic issues they are facing. Look at the rights going on inside India. Look at the kind of movements for the right of self-determination. Whether you talk about Kashmir or Khalistan or Nagaland or Assam or Bihar, or you go down in the Tamil side, nobody is bothering that 4 of their major states are suffering from corona. Nobody cares. And especially when we talk about the southern tail of India, it is very obvious that those people do not have any say in the main decision-making processes that are taking place in New Delhi. So there is a different chunk that is the primary decision-making body in India, and all the decisions they are currently taking are absolutely wrong, leading to a problem. I don't think once it is started, it is never going to be controlled or contained. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.
The rays of the sun fall upon an intriguing sight as it rises over the salt ranges in the Chakwar district of Pakistan. Dotted along these historic mountain ranges are the remnants of a long-gone Hindu Shahi dynasty that ruled over the area from the 5th and 6th century and built forts and temples to guard their borders against invasions. With the passage of time, the forts were abandoned and disappeared, but the homes of the gods, never short of believers, survived. The deceptive salt ranges are the incubation point of both Buddhism and Hinduism, where civilizations, cultures, religions and ideas came together, reflecting a myriad of architectural styles. And what remains of their glory can still be found in lonely isolation in the remotest of places. The many banyan trees and stupas, a silent reminder of the Buddhist monks who travel this route, quietly spreading their faith in the valleys and beyond. Located in the heart of this historic salt range, staring over the valleys and mountains for millennia, lies one of Hinduism's holiest sites, the Katas Raj Temple Complex.
And the legend associated with this temple is according to Hindu mythology, Lord Shiva lived for years of his marital life here with his wife Pati.
But then tragedy struck, and Shiva's love was no more. So unconsolable and intense was his grief that the uncontrolled tears poured on the earth to create two ponds, one in India and the other at Katas in Pakistan.
What is meant by Katas? The word derives from a Sanskrit name, Kataksha. And Kataksha means the tears from the eyes. This is with reference to the small lake which is there.
For Hindu pilgrims the world over, a dip in the sacred waters of the Kataksha not only cleanses them of their sins, but it is also believed to have healing powers. The Katas Raj temple complex is believed to date back to the Mahabharata era, one of the two major Sanskrit epics of ancient India, dating some 2,500 years ago. Among the many legends surrounding the complex, the most accepted ones relate to the 7 temples of Satgara, where the principal heroes of the epic, the 5 Pandava brothers, along with their common wives, lived part of their 12-year exile. And it is here the famous riddle challenged by the brothers from Yaksha took place. 4 of the brothers failed to guess and lost their lives, but the winning answer from the 5th brother brought the dead back to life. The temples at Katas are mostly constructed on square platforms. The elevation of the sub-shrines seems to form a series of cornices with small rows of pillars crowned by a ribbed dome, reflecting the style of the Kashmiri temples under the Karkota and Barma dynasties from AD 625 to 939, when the salt range belonged to the Kingdom of Kashmir. There are 3 main temples here. The decorative Ramchandra temple, dedicated to Lord Rama, is a double-story structure with 8 rooms of various dimensions on the ground floor and a staircase at the south leading to the first floor. Although damaged, the mandir's 2 jharokas or balconies still have a certain grandeur about them, and the paintings have been restored. The Hanuman temple lying towards the west is a highly rectangular enclosure with entrances to the south and the north. The temple's ceiling is beautifully decorated, and the paintings on the walls are dedicated to one of Hinduism's most revered figures from the Ramayana, the holy book of the Hindus. The 2 temples are close to each other, perhaps because of their close links, as Hanuman was the main character who helped Ram to locate his kidnapped wife Sita and helped to rescue her from Ravan, the tyrant ruler of Sri Lanka who had kidnapped her. The paintings here perhaps depict the return of Sita after her rescue. Both these temples are decorated with frescoes and paintings depicting scenes from the Ramayana. Many have been repainted and others restored or left as the originals, such as the one here that perhaps depicts the return of Sita after her rescue. The lotus flower is another significant feature that is seen all around the temple, along with the cobra necklace of Shiva. The Shiva temple, also built on a square platform, has a recessed round arch with faint cusps and a rectangular opening to the north. Shiva is the 3rd god in the Hindu triumvirate, and his role in Hinduism is to destroy the universe in order to recreate it. Worshippers here believe that according to tradition, Lord Krishna laid the foundation to the temple and established a handmade shivling here. Located on a small hillock and overlooking the entire temple complex is a small residential fort built during the reign of Hari Singh Nalwa for his use to live in and as a fort. The fort is rectangular and features 4 bastions, one in each corner. The walls are approximately 5 meters tall and feature an entryway in the western wall of the fort. The central portion of the fort features a small courtyard around which an arched veranda is found. The interior rooms are not really decorated. The smaller temples dotted around the area, built in pairs around the larger central temple, were built around 900 years ago or so, although the earliest of them dates back to the latter half of the 6th century AD. In the development of architecture and its link to the beginnings of Islamic architecture, the Qatar's temples play an important role.
So that means there is no break of the development of architecture from Hindu period to the Muslim period. And
The Federal Cabinet meeting held in Islamabad with Prime Minister Imran Khan in the chair. Cabinet decides to form a committee under NDMA to assess losses due to rains. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi is visiting Moscow tomorrow to attend the meeting of the SCO Council of Foreign Ministers. The Foreign Minister will also have bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the Council of Foreign Ministers. Pakistan Navy Day is being observed today to pay homage to the heroes of 1965 war. In this connection, Pakistan Navy released a special documentary film, Farrukh. Information Minister Shibli Farrukh says Pakistan Navy has a pivotal role in the defense and security of country. Security forces killed 5 wanted terrorists, including Wasim Zakaria, in an intelligence-based operation in Mir Ali area of North Waziristan. 10 terrorists also arrested. In first shooting at the disputed border between China and India in 45 years, Beijing says Indian troops fired provocative shots, forcing its soldiers to take countermeasures. Chinese military spokesman warns India to immediately stop dangerous moves after Indian troops illegally crossed the line of actual control. But that's all for the moment. For more details and live streaming, log on to our website world.ptv.com.pk. You can find us on Facebook page with the name of PTV World and follow us on Twitter at WorldPTV. Thanks a lot for watching, and it's goodbye for now.
Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Today we are going to talk about politics, but not our country's politics. We are going to talk about the US presidential race because if you have noticed, since 2016, all bets are out of the window, and it seems that we are living in very interesting times. On one side, of course, it seems that Joseph Biden is leading in opinion polls, and he might be ahead in the national poll. But when you look at the battleground states, there the difference between the two leaders is actually only within the margin of error. This is very important to note, because when you have margin of error, that means that there is a possibility, like 2016, that a lot of people are not being very forthright in giving the opinion, or they could vote either way. When you look at what both these candidates actually bring to the table, it seems that both are very solid candidates, even though of course, we have seen how international media reacts to Donald Trump's presidency, but the fact is, since he came to power, he had actually really empowered his country's economy, and it was going great, and then COVID-19 happened. COVID-19 is very important these days, because America is still debating whether to open the economy or not, and their infection rates are still going high, not low. The second very important thing or factor that might be in front of you is the racism issue. On one side, we hear the Democrats repeatedly talking about racism. On the other side, Republicans don't even want to acknowledge that there is any racism in the American economy, American society. This is the second factor. And then there is the controversy about postal ballots. If you cannot go and vote, how about sending your vote through a mail? And that is where things get complicated, because President Donald Trump has repeatedly said that because American voters don't have to produce any ID to vote, there's a possibility that there might be some shoddy work there. We are going to talk about all these matters, although we still are far away from the election day that has to take place on 3rd of November of this year, and we still have to see the American election debates, the presidential debates, but we still have to divine the direction of things right now, and we have to try understanding how things are going to shape up. In order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by Dr. Nazir Mahmood, who's an expert on international relations, joins us in the studio. Two more guests are going to join us either through Skype or through telephone. The moment they join us, I'm going to introduce them. Dr. Nazir Mahmood, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Let me ask you, how do you see the race right now? And not only that, how does it reflect on America's politics and where America might be at right now?
Okay. First, the chances of Biden and Trump.
Right.
I think the contest will be a tough contest.
Okay.
It will not be an easy one, though some people are saying and expressing their wishful thinking, as myself also,
right,
that Joe Biden would win and he
right,
should win.
Right.
But I think it will be a tough competition for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
But why do I say that? Number one, as you mentioned, Trump's performance economically was better before COVID. So
right,
he created jobs. In fact, hundreds of thousands of jobs were created, and overall economic performance was showing upward trend.
right,
So which was very positive.
okay,
So this is one factor. Second, why he will be presenting a tough contest to Joe Biden is his reliance on two factors. One is the racism, as you mentioned.
yeah,
He has relied in the 2016 election also. He relied on white majority vote. So
Okay.
what he is appealing to white majoritarian thinking.
okay,
Because he is essentially a populist leader, so he has been blaming openly African Americans, immigrants, Hispanic people for so many ills in society.
right.
So what happens
No,
when you start?
how does he blame the African Americans? He might be talking about illegal immigrants, but is he really talking about
Yes, I mean, if I'm sure you have,
Mexicans? Because Mexicans, the support for him among Mexicans has actually increased since 2016. In 2016, it was somewhere around 22%, and now it is somewhere around 36%.
Yes.
So that is, if he is blaming them, then why are they supporting him?
Yes. So let me answer your first question. How does he blame African Americans?
Right.
Well, openly he doesn't do that, but there has been evidence. Some of the people who have worked very closely with him, who have resigned and who were forced to leave or who were dismissed. The very current name is Michael Cohen.
Okay.
Michael Cohen was his fund manager, if you remember.
Right.
And then he was sentenced to imprisonment also for mismanagement in fund and payment.
Yeah, you're quoting his book, right?
Yes.
That is about to be released.
It's about to come, and you know, the excerpts that have come out in which he has said that he has been repeatedly blaming African and calling them stupid. He has even badmouthed even Nelson Mandela. So essentially, you know, there is evidence that's essentially at heart.
Yeah, but
there is an element of
he might be doing that, but publicly, when it comes to electoral politics, I didn't find that. That's why I asked
yes,
my question.
You're right. Publicly, he doesn't do that, but there's a strong perception that.
And we are going to talk about that in coming days as well. Although, let me actually compliment you that you have been very kind towards Michael Cohen, who is actually essentially a fixer. A lawyer and a fixer. But let me welcome Bariza Umar Sahiba, who's a Washington-based socio-cultural expert. Bariza Sahiba, thank you very much for being part of the program. We are talking about the U.S. elections, and at this moment, the first thing that I want to understand, I want to ask you, is about the state of affairs in the U.S. We understand that Portland and Kenosha might have further polarized the society. On the other side, there is the element of racism as well. How do you characterize the politics that is going on in the U.S. right now?
Well, unfortunately, there is a lot of identity politics. There was a lot of identity politics during the last election cycle as well, but that was more about Hillary Clinton being a woman. With the addition of the race issue now, it's and the issue of the coronavirus and how it's unprecedentedly affecting communities of color also. So you have a double whammy where communities of color are being affected by police violence and by the coronavirus, and the response of the state has been lackluster at best on both fronts, and actually destructive at worst, which is what we're really seeing with federal interference in Portland, for example. So the
Bariza Sahiba, since we are talking about how the race is shaping up and how much of racism or vulnerability of various minorities might be, do tell us at this moment, when you look at how the U.S. voters are going to vote in the elections, their patterns, do you think that the minority is going to lean towards Joseph Biden, or they might actually go with Donald Trump? I ask this because there is a new spoiler in the field, that is Kanye West, and he might be appealing to the black votes as well. What is your take on that?
I think this is still very much a two-party race. I don't think that there's a real chance of a third-party candidate. Even people who might have been tempted 6 months ago to write in Bernie Sanders' name, for example, I don't think that's going to happen. And it's not because Biden is a charismatic contender at all. I think this is it is very clearly an anti-Trump vote. And the progressives are going to get behind that because they can't do another. No, I don't think that the majority of Americans want to move back to the center the way that Clinton had moved the Democrats. I don't think I think that was a strategic error on the part of the Democratic National Convention. But I do think that they do want to put their weight behind Biden, if only to get someone else elected into office.
Right. Later when I come back to you, Bariza Sahaba, I'm going to ask you, why do you think it is entire Trump vote, and what might be actually the factors playing into it? Because we understand that a US president keeps on claiming that nobody has done more for the blacks and the Latino community than himself. I'm going to come back to you. Let me come back to the studio. Dr. Nazif, you are listening to the commentary right from Washington as well. But honestly, earlier you said something that caught my ear or caught my attention. You said that you wish that Biden, it is your wishful thinking. What is the factor behind it? Because we understand that Donald Trump might have very unique style of governing, but still his policies are not that bad, especially in our region.
Well, his policies, I'm surprised why you are saying that, because especially if you look at this region also, Afghanistan, China, India, Israel, so we have to look in a broader perspective.
Yeah, Israel is not my region, so I don't care about that.
Well, it affects UAE and Saudi Arabia. Anyway, why do I wish that Joe Biden should? We have to look at it in a broader perspective. We need to have a brief comparison of Democratic Party and Republican Party.
Right.
Overall, we see over the decades, not over the years, but over the decades, Democratic Party presidents have been slightly better in their performance internationally.
Okay.
They have been. Look at Obama.
Right.
Obama's policies overall, both domestically and internationally, were positive. I'm not saying that they were anti, pro-Muslim or anti.
Let me deconstruct this myth as well. Even though I'm a fan of President Obama, but President Obama started many wars, and he could not actually downgrade or reverse other wars that had been started before him. President Trump hasn't started a single war since he came to power. So,
well, I don't think that, if you start, that reminds me, this war business reminds me of George W. Bush Jr.
Yeah.
I remember, and I'm sure you also remember, he won, before Trump 2016 election, when the electoral vote overturned the popular vote, the previous incidence was in 2000. Election against Al Gore. At that time also people were expecting that Al Gore would win, but he wouldn't. Anyway, so after that first election of George W. Bush, when he started two wars, one in Afghanistan and the other in Iraq, hardly anybody was expecting George W. Bush to win, but he won.
Right.
So
No, but he has to thank Osama bin Laden for that, because that day before the election, Osama bin Laden actually released a speech that reminded people of the kind of enemy they might be facing, and George W. Bush won.
There are, in addition to that, there are other factors also. Why Trump is going to give a tough fight. As I said, first was his economic performance. Second is his reliance on white majoritarian vote.
Right.
And finally, he is also soft corner for both India and Israel. And as we know that within America, within the United States, and I'm sure Barize would also testify to that within American presidential elections, Indian lobby and Israeli lobby plays a very important role. And in the previous one also, I think why suddenly electoral vote went in favor of Trump. If I remember correctly, there were 7 electoral votes which are normally called faithless votes. Now, faithless vote means that popular vote goes for one candidate, but the electoral college, what is electoral college? Electoral college is essentially electors. There are 538 electors. So there were 7 electors who went against popular vote. So that shows that, there is something, behind the scene mechanism, various lobbies working.
No, but with due respect, the electoral votes or the people who cast those votes are like post offices. Every state has its own electoral number.
Yes.
And people who get, in a state, if a candidate wins, the entire votes go to that candidate.
That is the issue, not always.
Right.
Not always.
We used to have this debate during Hillary Clinton's time that there is a possibility that certain electors might not vote for
That's what happened.
Donald Trump. Hardly. It was, I mean, remember the kind of humongous claim there was, and then Donald Trump comes over and says that the entirety of the popular vote, that the lead that was there, came from one state, and that was California, where illegals might be there and they might be voting. Sir, I'm told that we are joined by Ambassador Zamir Akram, who is a career diplomat, senior analyst, does appear on this channel as well. Thank you very much, Ambassador, sir, for your time. Let me ask you, how do you see the U.S. Electoral race shaping up right now?
Well, the polling indicates that Mr. Biden has a majority as of now, but you know, between now and the actual date for elections, things may change. And certainly, Mr. Trump is playing to the white supremacist gallery, which is his real political base. And so he is concentrating on what is called Middle America, the America in between the two seaboards. And that is where he had gained the support for his last victory. And again, he is focusing on those very people, raising their concerns about all kinds of issues such as African Americans and immigrants and Islam and all this other things that he has used. So this is still, I wouldn't count him out. That's number one. The other problem is that how will this election be conducted during this COVID pandemic, which has really hit America very badly. And so if they're going to have postal balloting, how will they be counted? And there is always room for some kind of claims and counterclaims. And then, of course, there is this other question which you have discussed with the other commentator, and that is about the difference between the popular vote and the electoral vote, because there is this electoral college, and we have seen twice now in recent American history that elections which have been won by a candidate with the most popular votes were actually declared in favor of the candidate who won more electoral votes. This happened with George Bush and I don't know what was his name, the then vice president. And so there is now increasingly there is this has been happening in American politics, that there is a difference. There has been a difference between the popular and the electoral vote. So these are all these are questions which are still very open.
Ambassador sir, one more question that I have to ask you. Earlier, since we were talking about Democrats versus Republicans and their policies towards the region, how do you see Donald Trump as president when it comes to our region, especially what is going on in Afghanistan?
I think that usually politics in America have difference over domestic issues. But on largely foreign policy and security issues, if you see the track record, they have largely followed the same pattern. I mean, Trump has made some really outrageous kind of steps, such as with his NATO partners and, with some countries in the Far East like Japan as well. And he has accentuated the confrontation with both China and Russia. However, having said that, I think that the contours of a Biden administration's policy towards South Asia will remain the same. I don't think that we should expect a Biden administration to be more favorably disposed towards Pakistan, because this is all tied to America's strategic interest, and that interest is to contain China, in which the Indo-US strategic partnership is a very important part. So they will want to continue with that strategic partnership, and that means that they will downgrade the relations with Pakistan as compared to India.
That is a possibility, sir. Since you have talked about US strategic interest, let me ask you, this Indian slide towards authoritarianism and fascism. Do you think that it is also in the US interest to control or check this slide? Because if they identify with India as a democracy and that's why they want to work with it, India seems to be moving away from democracy. Is it not true?
I am a political realist, and I think that geopolitics trumps everything else. Okay, so it's geopolitics. If there is a clash between America's geopolitical interests and its commitment to democracy and human rights and other issues like that, I think those issues will be sacrificed. We have seen that happen before. Look at the Obama administration. During his campaign, Obama talked about solving Kashmir, and he was favorably disposed towards Pakistan, and he wanted to play a role to promote better relations in South Asia, etc., etc.
Right.
In actuality, what did he do? He did the reverse, and that was because he pursued American strategic interests. So I think that will remain, and I don't think that Americans, although they will keep saying things that India should not, adopt this nationality or citizenship law, that they should end the lockdown in Kashmir, but beyond making these kind of noises, in real terms, I don't see the Americans doing anything to stop the Indians from what they're doing.
With that, Ambassador Zamir Akram Saab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Let me go back to Washington. Bariza, I hope she's with us. Ma'am, once again, since we are talking about US elections, and earlier you said that a third party is not going to actually have an impact. But we have traditionally seen that the third party candidates actually undercut vote base of either of the two parties. Do you think that in this scenario there is at least a possibility that Kanye West, who is now going to appear on the ballots of 11 states, he might actually have some kind of impact on the black vote? Earlier you also spoke about this being anti-Trump vote. Do tell us, why do you think that it is, what are the characteristics that might be necessitating that kind of anti-Trump vote? Please go ahead.
I just want to, if I may, add one thing. I think that if a Biden administration comes, there will be a new Iran deal, which I think is important to recognize. As for Kanye West, the Democrats' base has been heavily African American. African American women have voted for the Democrats pretty much wholesale since African American women were given the right to vote. And especially with Kamala Harris on the ticket, I don't think that there are some issues with race and her role as a public prosecutor and her relationship with the police departments. But I really don't think that the black vote that is for the Democrats, it went heavily to Biden in the primaries as well. I don't think that is going to Kanye West. Kanye West is, people call him a musical genius, but I don't think that he's taken very seriously politically, and especially when he stood next to Trump, I think a lot of his credibility definitely went away by then. In previous cases where you have had viable third-party candidates who have taken a chunk of the vote, they were good candidates. Ralph Nader has always been a consistent and good candidate. On the other end, the libertarians, the non-interventionist ideas that they represent, and the open economy, but not the conservative values of the Republicans. I think you do have a good chunk of people who want to go in those directions. But I just don't see a candidate like that in the third party.
And why do you think it is an anti-Trump vote?
I think it's an anti-Trump vote, first of all, primarily, and I guess for Biden supporters, it's actually been a bit of a godsend the way that the administration has handled the coronavirus. So Trump was really enjoying his economic numbers. And the economy has just, the coronavirus and the response has really hit the economy very badly. Now, if he decides to release a vaccine before a vaccine is ready in October, in anticipation of these elections, who knows? It could all reverse itself. But as of right now, the economy is bad. The stock market is going up, but interestingly, the stocks that people are buying in are the stocks that are the industries that would do well under a Biden presidency, apparently. So things like alternative energy sources are going up, whereas oil and coal are going down. So if people want to look at the stock market as an indicator, then that's also an indicator of the potential of a Biden presidency. But the anti-Trump, the way he's handled the race crisis and the way he is standing by police when people are catching on camera, the absolute impunity with which law enforcement is functioning in the United States with communities of color, where you see.
And I'm glad that you have actually highlighted the issue of law and order as well. I want to understand another very crucial aspect, because you are a socio-cultural expert. Let me ask you about this inherent media bias, because when we look at the coverage of Boogaloo Boys, or for that matter alt-right, it is clear that they are racist and they are being highlighted that way. But whenever we hear about Antifa, for example in Kenosha, we have seen what is happening in Portland as well, the US media seems to underplay that possibility that there is a body called Antifa. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because there isn't that kind of historical organization behind an anti-fascist movement. So there are people who can call themselves Antifa, but there isn't any kind of white supremacist groups have been very active, and they have names, and they work like brotherhoods, and they know each other, and I don't know, maybe like an ISIS equivalent, where yes, you might have lone wolves, but there's some sort of a community around it, even if it's an online community, and they affiliate themselves with these groups. I don't think that there's the same kind of community organizing with Antifa. I don't think there are the numbers either. And it's very new in the United States. It has a longer history in Europe, but it doesn't have that kind of presence.
Right. But since I bring up this matter because we follow the Western, actually conservative media as well, and they keep on actually building this thing up, and they keep on portraying that all this arson looting that went on in recent days, that might actually have something to do with all this, and it might have an impact on the elections also. But I'm going to come back to you. Let me talk to Dr. Nazir here with me, sir. Sir, we are looking at one very important aspect, that is the US president calling himself a law and order candidate, right? And especially when he was giving his convention acceptance speech. At that time, in Kenosha, violence was breaking out and people were being attacked physically, right? Who does this law and order situation help? Because earlier all the conservatives were saying that it will happen in Joe Biden's America. But the truth is, it is happening right now in Donald Trump's America. And that there is so much polarization that people from both sides are attacking each other.
Yes. Well, it can go either way. You know, it is to some extent it can help Trump also, because as we discussed earlier, that the more racist or racial issue comes up, white majority may tend to vote for Trump. How it can go for Joe Biden, because Joe Biden has very clearly mentioned about diverting funds from police force to some other social security, health, education matters like that. And for that, Joe Biden was criticized also by Republican and conservative lot. That the allegation was that Joe Biden will be defunding the police.
Which was a lie, because he clearly said that I don't mean it. I am not going to.
Yes, but he, in that interview, he agreed that, you know, there is a possibility of diverting police fund to social security, education and health matters.
Okay.
So in that case, I think Biden has an upper edge because he has talked about reforming police.
Right.
He has talked about law and order situation as a serious issue, and it needs to be tackled. So it might go in favor of Joe Biden too. But as I said, the only time will show how it ends.
Yeah, but whenever we talk about systemic racism, especially in America, do you think that it is wise to actually color the entire law enforcement community with one brush? I ask this because usually the policemen actually come from within their own communities, right? And there must be bad apples. But when you actually try to actually criticize all the policemen, there's going to be, or there's bound to be some kind of resentment in the community when you undermine them. And that vote could easily go to Donald Trump.
You're right, but bad apples maybe one or two, but what we have seen in the previous decades, again and again such bad apples are coming up, so
right.
This George Floyd was not just
again,
one case.
But again, the same kind of violence comes from the communities that might be targeted, and there too they have bad apples, right? So it is not as if the entire community is bad. Similarly, when it comes to police, because I remember in 2016, ICE, Immigration, and Customs Service, they were actually very vocally in support of Donald Trump because Democrats offended them, and he was talking about this border wall. Don't you think that there's a possibility that police unions might actually go ahead and endorse Donald Trump?
I don't think so that police unions will openly do that, but institutional, we have to recognize, and it is based on various, studies conducted, that institutional racism is there.
Okay.
So when we talk about...
Only in the US or elsewhere in the world as well?
Well, in UK, I have personally seen there. I have
in good old Pakistan? Good old India?
Racism in Pakistan, racism...
No, systemic, institutionally systemic racism in law enforcement.
I would rather say discriminatory treatment probably, because, in Pakistan racism is not as race as such is not an issue.
Right.
There are minority issues, sectarian issues, there are issues.
Right.
So there might be some policemen who may be,
and in India?
In India now, increasingly, it is very open.
Right.
Discrimination, institutional discrimination is there, especially since BJP came to power in 2014. For the past 6 years, it has been terrible for other minorities,
right.
Muslims, Christians.
I don't want to actually move in that direction, but people say that BJP never left. It was out of power, but it was still controlling a lot of cultural issues in India. So that inherent anger against the minorities might be there. It might be elsewhere as well. But you don't start to dismantle the police and all that, right? Let me go back to our guest in the US, Bariza Umar Saiba. Ma'am, since we are talking about systemic racism, Donald Trump recently discouraged the critical race theory's use in law enforcement and policies as well. Do you think that it is going to have some kind of backlash as well?
I think it is having backlash. To say that diversity training is un-American is very clearly a nod in the direction of we don't want to talk about our people of color, and we're just going to pretend they're not there and these issues don't exist. I do want to just say one thing about, even if police unions were to endorse Trump, which is possible, the way that President Trump has gone after people who have been in military service here is really unprecedented. I don't think that there is any president in living memory who has insulted soldiers and soldiers who have been prisoners of war.
That was quite an intriguing story. Oh, yeah, that's true. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I do think he has very much lost that vote, the Republican and the Democrat vote within the armed forces. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where was I?
Right. We are going to come back and we are going to talk about critical race theory, and we are going to talk about U.S. Electoral politics in detail as well. Let us take first a break. We have to viewers go for a break. The moment we come back, we are going to resume the discussion. Take a break. Welcome back. Before going to the break, we were discussing U.S. elections, and not only that, we were talking about dynamics in the U.S. Society as well. They have been there for quite some time. For example, the race relations, economy, urban-rural divide, the difference between various states as well, especially when it comes to economic progress. But this time it seems that all these factors have come to the fore. I have with me, continuing from the previous segment, Bariza Umar joining us from Washington. Bariza Sahaba, earlier we were talking about critical race theory, but I'm going to move away from that and ask you another question regarding polls. The way polls are projecting that Joseph Biden might be leading, but there's a lot of chatter that many voters might not want to disclose their loyalty towards Donald Trump, and that's why there can be some kind of upset. What is your take on that?
I think absolutely people want to be thought of as racist, and I think where on the one hand I want to hope that because people do not think of themselves as racist and want other people to think of themselves as racist, they will cast their vote in the other direction. The fact that no one is going to know who you voted for certainly allows you still that kind of credible deniability. So really, I think it might be closer than people hope, because I don't think anyone wants to really believe that there is this really deep-seated racism over here, which is becoming harder and harder to deny.
Right.
And yeah.
When you look at the claims, because I've been listening to certain elements that might be called racist, but they are from, like Proud Boys and others, and alt-right as well. They keep on talking about the white races victimhood as well. Do you think that racism is something that cuts both ways, or it is specifically focused or targeted at the minorities?
Oh, racism, absolutely. The way that racism has evolved from the eugenics movement in the 18th, 19th centuries, there's absolutely no way that racism, you can have like reverse racism. And I think that is a ploy that is very much used by communities that have had racial privilege. And I don't think that it is, it's not to say that there are not very, very poor and suffering white communities and that have been affected by the opioid epidemic and the drug epidemic. That is absolutely true. There are a lot of very poor white communities, and that is the segment of the white male population that did not go to college. That is the largest vote bank for President Trump. But to turn that into race is in the same way that people turn the anger of economically depressed communities against immigrants, for example. Right. It's just instead of addressing the real problems, to look for an enemy from within instead of looking at an enemy that is above you and keeping some sort of status quo. So I don't think that there is this reverse racism thing, and to be able to understand.
So you think that there might be victimhood, but it doesn't rationalize any entire immigrant sentiment, right? Let me come back to the studio, Dr. Saab, since we are talking about something that you said earlier as well. Let me go back to what you said. You said that Donald Trump is very pro-India. So was Barack Obama.